Hello, this is the first in a series of webinars created specifically for Buffalo Public Schools on grant writing for EdTech Dreams. This is the first of those webinars focusing on your dream. I'm your presenter, Dr. Rita Oates. I've written a lot of grants, I've taught grant writing, and I've helped people with grants. And I hope today that you'll be able to go through my webinar series and figure out ways that you too can be a successful grant winner. This toolkit will have 8 parts. The first one today that we'll be covering is on your dreams. Quickly, the other parts are knowing your numbers, your demographics, your having a biography, finding some quick funding sources, finding more funding sources, some do's and don'ts of grant writing, why it's critical that your budget and evaluation must be totally in sync. And finally, after you win that grant, say thank you and work on ways to get more funding, continuing funding. So let's start now with your dream. I want you to take a couple of minutes, or maybe even a half a minute, to write down what you want to do in a paragraph or two. If necessary, you can stop the recording and do this, and then when you've finished, come back and go on with the recording. The idea is that you want to have an elevator pitch, something that you could say in 30 seconds or a minute to someone about what it is that you want to do with technology, with your grant, with your idea, whatever it is that you want to seek funding for. And if you can't get started any other way, how would you tell your mom about what you want to do? So take a few seconds and think about that. And I want to give you an example. Here's 83 words in an NEA Foundation grant that was written and won. This particular grant has 3 deadlines, February, June, and October. So if you're interested in doing one for this grant program, you can. You'll notice that this author, in 83 words in just 3 sentences, very carefully describes what it is that she wants to do in her grant, how she's going to go about it, and even how she will share the results of what she does. So it's a good, quick model. Another one, this is one that was used in a federal grant that I co-authored when I worked for Miami-Dade County Public Schools and worked with a professor at Barry University, and received a very large federal grant called FIPSI grant that is specifically for teacher training in projects that cooperate between school districts or local education agencies, as they're called, and universities or higher ed institutions. So now take a few minutes and draft your dream. When you've got it, come back and restart the recording. The next thing you need to do is find your dream team. In other words, who else can work with you on this grant? It's really hard work to do a grant all by yourself, and it's a lot more interesting and also a lot more powerful when you can work in a team. It may be that it's only one person, it may be that it's a team of players from your school. You need somebody who's a critical friend who can be honest with you excuse me, about what's not perfect or where it needs work, and also see where there may be places that need polish. You may, if you have enough people involved, get different people to draft different sections of the grant and then have one person weave it together so it sounds like it's written with one voice. And it's always useful to have eyes for proofreading both the text and the numbers before you submit. So maybe the math teacher in your school can do nothing more than just check the budget, but that would be a tremendous help for you. Or somebody who is the pickiest person on grammar and spelling and punctuation would be a great person to give eyeballs before you submit. You also want to think about who's on the team from outside the school. Who are external organizations or partners or businesses who can write letters of support or who could share in the costs or maybe even help do some of the work, providing volunteer labor or help in other ways. And the idea here is that if I'm a granting organization and I have to choose between one very good idea and another one that already has some help of, and maybe minimal help, maybe $100 from the PTA at the school, and maybe the local grocery store is going to donate some food for one of the training sessions for the teachers. If I have a choice between just a plain application and one with support from other external people, I will always pick the external one, because that shows that there's other people who've already said, this is a winner, this is one I want to back. It also helps me know that you don't just need my money from my granting agency, but in fact, you found some other sources so I don't have to pick up the whole tab. And that's really an important thing for many granting organizations, that they can see that there is support other places. So just take a second and also think about who's on your team. And then you'll need to find research to support your dream. That could be in professional publications. If you're an English language arts teacher, maybe you're a member of National Council of Teachers of English. If you're a math teacher, maybe you're a member of NCTM. Content that's from those publications, books or articles. If nothing else, you can go to scholar.google.com to look for things. If what you're doing is EdTech related, you might be able to look in ISTE's publications, ISTE.org. And another great source, if again you're using EdTech publications, is editlib.org. I'll show you that one in just a second. If you're taking grad school courses, it may be available to you through a university. It may be available through your public library. Otherwise, it's more than $100 for you to buy as an individual. So look around and see if you can find access another way before you buy it yourself. And then think about, have you ever done any action research or any preliminary work in this area that you're going into or wanting to get funded? If you haven't, could you do something before you submit the grant? Show the granting organization that you're not a beginner in this area, that you've already got more than your feet wet, and that you've been involved in this for some time. This is what EditLib looks like. It's the Digital Library of Education and Information Technology, where it's a great place to search for other studies that have been done. You'll need these both in preparing your proposal and later on in preparing your evaluation. And so this is an example of two different kinds of research that you might use. These were two that were used in a grant to license a digital series of picture books for primary readers called One More Story. And so the first one is actually an article from the New York Times Magazine. It's a popular article. It would probably be inappropriate to cite in a university paper, but it is perfect to include in a grant application. In this case, it's a first-person story of the author using this particular product with a child and being so absolutely dazzled by it. So it's great support for why would you want to have this product in your school. The second one is a very academically rigorous study looking at interactive picture ebooks in the target ages and a little older, and published in the highly respected Reading Teacher. So you can have both kinds of research. It's just helpful to show that you're not coming up with something that people haven't already examined, that you can stand on the shoulders of giants in preparing what you're doing. And then as you're dreaming, you need to think about, what do you need to buy? Would you spend the money on in this grant? Often the very first thing that people say is, oh, I want to buy tablets, or oh, I want to license this software. But there may be other things that you need to think about. Does your building need an electrical upgrade? Do you need furniture? Do you need paper to print out on? Do you need to have a custodian who can open the school on Saturday so you can have training sessions for teachers on Saturday? Are there buses for field trips that maybe is part of what your project is? There's lots of different things. So I would suggest that you develop a very rough budget, and it may not be anything real fancy or real detailed at this point, but it's also a good time to check in with your principal if you haven't already, just to say, hey, I'm thinking about working on this. What do you think? It may also be good to check in with the district office. And so something I use when I'm first working on a grant is I just take a spreadsheet and start making a list of what is it that I need to spend money on and what might it cost, and go and research that. and find out, are some of these on bid? Are there laptops or tablets that are on bid with purchasing? Is there anybody whose approval I need? What signatures beyond the principal if it's going to be purchased? And so what I recommend, and you can see in the lower part of the screen, there's a summary tab, and then I have two more tabs, one that's detail and one that's purchase from. So that if I'm coming up on line 9 and saying I want this product and I found it for $500, you can remember what catalog or what website did you go to that you saw that, so that later on it's easy to do. In addition, you may need to get information from your district for guidelines. For example, if you're paying for release time for the project leader, you may have to pay some fringe benefits, and that may be 28% of the salary. Or the grant may allow, and the district may want to get, what they call indirect costs, which are probably around 8%. So if you wrote a grant for $100,000, the district might keep $8,000 as part of the way that they fund the actual grants office. And that's typical. But you want to find those things out so you kind of know what are your guidelines in what this might cost. And I'm going to give you a moment to work on these budget ideas. Again, you can pause this recording and work on that for a few minutes as if we were in a workshop, and then resume. I want to give you this sample budget worksheet that's used by Miami-Dade County Public Schools as an overview. It's combining many things, where it's combining equipment into one line and office supplies into one line. You may have multiple lines for each of those, but trying to have both requested funds and then where might other funds come from. And again, as a first pass, this is not your final work, you might think about, well, what could the grant pay part of, and what might the school pay, or what might some company pledge who's got a parent in the school, or what might the PTA do? And so there may be a way that you can come up with this to get very creative, to show that it's not that you're just asking for, in this case, $50,000, but you have a $100,000 project, and $50,000 will come from the grant and $50,000 from other funds. Your project may be very small. It may be $2,000 or $5,000, so don't be frightened by these big numbers. It's almost as much work to write for a grant for $100,000 as it is for $1,000, so I like to say go for the bucks. So what you've done in this section is you've started grant writing by thinking of a dream, a budget, and a team. By the time you finish looking at this, you should have your dream written down in a paragraph or so, up to a page. You should have identified some research to support and guide your dream. You should have some idea of what things will you need to spend money on in a very rough budget. Think about who in the school can work with you, and that could even be the treasurer of the school or the school secretary to help you with things, or parent volunteers. And finally, who are some possible partners who will help you fund this dream? Happy grant writing, and next we'll do number 2.